Lisa. My mom's birthday is coming up and I need to make her a card, and I love this Stampin' Up set called In This World, and I think these images will make her a beautiful card. I'm going to do it not a collage, but more so that each image has its own little vignette. And so we're going to have the door and the chair, the butterfly, the key, and then I've got these words here. And then this will go on the inside. You're the kind of person who makes a positive difference in the world, and then especially in my life. And I thought that would make a pretty happy birthday card. And then I'll use this design somewhere along on the card. So I'm going to have different little vignettes. And in addition to these stamps, I thought we'd add some other stamps that could kind of work in the background. I also thought this would be a great opportunity to use the new Distress Oxide inks. I went for it and decided to invest in all 12 of them at one time. I think that's the first time I've bought a set of full-size ink pads of anybody's at one time. I usually just buy them one at a time, and I was going to do that this time, but where I was going to buy them from, they had sold out of most of the colors I really wanted, so I just found another vendor that had all of the inks at one time and went ahead and ordered the pack of 12. I did this little card deck in another video that I'll link up, so you can, if you'd like to make your own, if you have the inks or you have some other kind of inks, you can see how that's done. The way these inks work is you can use them direct to paper, and they have a almost chalky kind of look. You can add water to them, and that's where you get this oxide appearance. You can emboss them, just stamp them directly, or you can distress the edges, and there's a few other things. You can do watercolors and other things with them. So we're going to do some different things with these on our card, and I have picked out a few of these that I really like to work on the background first. So we'll do the background, and then we'll start doing each of the little vignettes for this card. So we're going to start with the background, and like all the Distress products, you can apply ink to your craft sheet, add some water, and apply your paper and get some really interesting looks. The difference with the Distress Oxides is if you dry between layers, the next layer of color will sit on top instead of blending. They can still be reactivated with water, but if you're applying the Distress Oxides to a dry set of Distress Oxides, the inks will stay on top. And so it's you get some really interesting looks. Now what I'm doing here is working with some plain white cardstock. This is Nina Cover Exact Index, I think is what it's called, that I use for this type of product, but you could use watercolor paper, you could use any kind of heavy cardstock for this. And I'm adding, I've added one layer, I'm adding some browns, and I want a little more green, and just kind of purposely putting the paper where I want it to pick up a few more inks. And you can mop up some of the splatters. You can use the heat gun to dry between layers. You can also add color by applying color to your craft sheet, adding water, and then sprinkling it on with a paintbrush. And that creates some kind of cool effects as well. I did realize, though, once I got this done, that what I think would be really pretty for a background is to use book paper. I sell book paper in my Etsy shop if you are interested in some. If you don't, I have some good variety packs of different kinds of book paper and music sheets, so I pulled some of those out. I don't know why I didn't think about that before, because that gives you a richer background to have that design, those words in the background. And in this case, the vignettes are going to sit on top, so you're not going to see a lot of the words, but what you're going to see is going to be more interesting peeking through between the different ones. So I've got a sheet of music, and I've got a piece of book paper. I needed something large because this is going to end up being a fairly large card, so I needed something that the printing covered a large area of it. So I'm using basically the same colors. I think I switched out the brown to Vintage Photo from the Walnut Stain, but I've got pretty much the same colors here, and going through the process. And I'm going to cut out a few little bits since you've already seen this process once before. But I go a little further with these because this is definitely what I want to do, and I'm going to add some distressing along to the edge of them. And there I'm sprinkling some of the brown on, where I was sprinkling the red color on before. And both of these are pretty. I think the book paper, the dictionary paper is going to be the best because it has smaller print, and again, you're not going to see a lot peeking through between the different vignettes, but I think that music paper is also really, really pretty. So we're just going to add a little bit of the, can't remember, I think it was the vintage photo I used for the edge of this, and I cut out, again, some of this video so you didn't have to watch me distress all the way around. Distressing with the ink on the edges is the same process it is with the other distress inks. So we'll see that background again in a few moments. What I'm doing now is sort of laying out all of my different elements that I know that I want to have their own little piece of paper and just marking here, and then I'm going to take this paper to the paper trimmer and cut out some blocks. I'm not measuring, I'm just cutting according to the size of the stamped images, and I will probably cut some of these down. This is figuring out how they're going to be arranged on the paper. I like the butterfly and the door opposite each other. These are the largest elements of the group. And we'll do something to make sure the words stand out so that those are really visible. I did need to trim that paper down. I had them a little bit large. Now I know I want to stamp the key in the gray color, and I want the door in a brown, and also behind the door I thought it would be fun to do another image, like another background image, and I'm using the fossiled amber to stamp this large image, almost like a sun, behind the door. And then we have our key there, and it's going to be an ice spruce. Behind it, I'm doing just some regular distress ink in antique linen with some flourishes. The distress oxides clean up the same way as any of your other inks, with stamp cleaner, water, baby wipe, whatever you want to use. Now, a feature of the distress oxide inks is that they stay wet for a little while after they're stamped, as opposed to the other distress inks and Stampin' Up! Inks, and you can emboss with them. So you sprinkle a little clear embossing powder over there and heat it, and you get a nice embossed image. Now I decided to color in my key, so once it's good and set, then I'm going to color it with a light gray marker, the Smoky Slate marker from Stampin' Up! Now I'm having a little trouble with my door, but I got it stamped there on the pad. It's one of those clear mount stamps and wanted to slide off. You can, what I find with those, you can put a little Tombow adhesive on the stamp and let it dry, and it becomes sticky on the back side, and then it will adhere to your clear blocks, but I haven't done that with this set. Now what I'm doing here is watercoloring. I stamped this image in archival ink, and then I colored the edge in a gray with a gray marker, and I'm filling in the middle with using the distress inks and a paintbrush to do watercoloring. It gives you really beautiful varied color because you just get a little more yellow in some places and a little less yellow in others, and it looks very natural. Alright, I'm trying to decide on a color here for the background for one of the ivory pieces of paper. This is the normal ivory cardstock from Stampin' Up! And I decided on, it's the light green color there. I can't remember the name of it right now, but that color that I wanted to use, Cracked Pistachio, that's it. And I thought it was a beautiful color. It makes a gorgeous background for this. I'm going to stamp the words now that it's dry with the walnut stain. It looks really, really pretty, except, you can wait for the except or the but to come along here. I didn't put any of this color in the background. So when I lay it on the background, it just really doesn't work, I don't think. I think it blends with all the other colors, but without having any of it in the background to pull out, it didn't work. So we're going to do some other things with that later on. Now the butterfly, I thought I would just put some ink along the edges, but I'm using Stampin' Up! Cardstock, and it doesn't blend at all once you've put it down on that cardstock. It's set. So, this was somewhat of an experiment to me. I hadn't used these inks before, and I didn't end up liking those edges. I need to trim this down some anyway, so we're going to do some trimming with that. I did like the splatters of brown ink over it. I thought that added a lot to it. So I'm trimming the this down between the paper trimmer and my scissors, and I'm kind of going along the shape of the stamped image. So I lose a lot of that brown that I painted on the edge. Now for the edge of the chair, I'm going to use the Faded Jeans color and stamp with a Stamping Up stamp. It's a label stamp, but I'm just using the edge of it, and I really liked how the edge of that chair one came out. I colored the chair the same way I did the butterfly. I just used a fire brick color. Now here again, I'm trying to do some kind of background for the words. I did the same thing with the blue, and I didn't like it. And so you're going to see in a minute what I end up doing with those words, because neither of the things that I did before worked with my background. The problem with the blue one is the words just didn't show up enough when they were stamped in a dark print. I didn't think to see it. I am going to add some other things to this card, buttons, ribbon, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to just be stamped images, so I can put, and I'm going to be handing this to my mother. It ends up being so large I don't have an envelope or really have paper that I can make a large enough envelope to put this in. It's like a 6x9. And I've probably got something I could use, but I'm just going to hand it to her as a birthday card. I mean, all she's going to do is throw the envelope away anyway. She likes to display her cards, so this will be one she can put out and display. And what I did for the words is I just stamped them on another piece of the ivory cardstock, and I stamped a little bit of background image with the blue color around the edges of it. And that's what I did instead of trying to color that in. That whole background. The coloring would have worked if I'd started off with a good light color like maybe the fossilized amber, but I just didn't. So I felt like I had enough yellow on there. Now these flowers I was about to put away, I just got them in. A friend sent them to me, very generously sent me several things, including these Prima flowers, and I realized one of them would look perfect on my card. So I've got everything on the card. I put some cardstock behind each of the little vignettes. The only thing I don't like is the key. I don't feel like there's enough there, so I'm going to do a little stamping directly on it. One of the advantages to doing the vignettes is if you mess one up, you just have one to redo. You don't have to redo the whole card. But I liked how that fire brick came out with just a little bit of stamping and a little more touch of red. You can see a brad there on one of them. And on the inside of the card, I had to do, piece a different sheet of paper in here because it was even larger than a 12 by 12 folded in half. So I think it's like 6.5 by 9 or something like that. So check out the video for the different inks and how to make the card deck if you'd like. I appreciate your feedback whenever I do a video. I love to get questions and comments. Thanks so much for joining me.